A man was on his way home one night when he heard a strange noise coming from a dark alleyway. Against his better judgment, he walked over to see what it was. There, bathed in the flickering light of a distant street lamp, stood a woman dressed in black, her face obscured by a veil. Chills ran down his spine as he realized she was staring at him, though her eyes were hidden. Fear gripped him, and he felt an overwhelming urge to flee, but his legs wouldn't obey. The woman remained silent, her gaze piercing through the darkness. She took a step forward, and he noticed a glint of metal in her hand, a blade. Panic surged within him as he backed away slowly, but she followed, relentless. He found himself cornered against a cold, unforgiving wall. Her breath, icy and unnatural, brushed against his neck as she leaned closer. He could barely breathe, his heart pounding out of his chest. He wanted to look away, but her invisible eyes held him captive. Lifting the blade, she whispered,
"Don't be afraid."
Her voice was soft, almost soothing, but it did nothing to ease his terror. She lowered the blade and grabbed his hands, her grip like iron.
"I'm not going to hurt you."
She continued, her voice dripping with false reassurance. His body trembled, but he felt a strange, inexplicable calm washing over him. She held his gaze for a few moments longer before releasing his hands and disappearing into the darkness. The man stood there, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. Relief washed over him, mingled with curiosity and a lingering fear. He decided to follow her, drawn by an unseen force. She walked with an eerie grace, her footsteps silent on the pavement. To his surprise, she led him to his own house. She stopped at the entrance and turned to face him, a smile playing on her lips beneath the veil. He felt his heart race as she approached, her beauty almost otherworldly. Leaning in close, she whispered,
"I'm sorry for scaring you earlier."
Her sudden change in demeanor was unsettling. He couldn't respond. His voice caught in his throat. She pressed her body against his, her breath cold on his neck, and he felt a strange mix of fear and desire.
"Do you want to come inside?"
she asked, her voice dripping with seduction. Unable to resist, he nodded. She took his hand, her touch icy and unnatural, and led him into the house, guiding him to the bedroom. She sat on the bed, her eyes never leaving his.
"Come here."
She commanded, her voice a dark siren's call. He obeyed, sitting next to her. She moved closer, her body heat a stark contrast to the chill in the room.
"Are you nervous?"
she asked, her fingers tracing his cheek. He nodded, and she laughed softly, a sound that sent shivers down his spine.
"Don't be,"
she whispered, moving even closer. Her lips were inches from his, and he felt himself falling under her spell. He couldn't resist any longer. He leaned in and kissed her, a rush of excitement and dread washing over him. The kiss grew more intense, her presence overwhelming. His hands wandered, but instead of warmth, he felt a creeping cold seeping into his skin. He pulled away, gasping for breath, and looked into her eyes. Her smile was predatory, and he felt a sense of impending doom. Leaning in again, their lips met once more. The kiss was feral, filled with a desperate hunger. He was losing himself, drowning in her darkness. His hands moved down her back, and he felt something wet and sticky. Pulling away, he looked down and saw his hands covered in blood. Horrified, he tried to pull back, but she held him tight, her grip like a vice. Her smile widened, revealing sharp, jagged teeth.
"You should have listened,"
she hissed, her voice now a demonic growl. She raised the blade, and before he could react, she plunged it into his chest. Pain exploded through him as she cut into his flesh, a twisted look of ecstasy on her face. He screamed, but no sound came out. She moved with precision, slicing him apart piece by piece, her laughter echoing through the room. His vision blurred, darkness closing in, and the last thing he saw was her face, now fully revealed, a hideous, demonic visage, reveling in his agony. In the end, there was nothing left of him but blood and fragments scattered across the room like a macabre masterpiece. She stood over the wreckage, her eyes burning with an ominous light. Then she walked up to the head lying on the floor and said, stroking its cheek,
"Don't be afraid."
Then she slipped into the night, leaving only death and terror behind her.